Hey everybody, welcome back into the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. It was National Signing Day, and there wasn't a lot for Ohio State to do because most of the work was done in December. This is Rapid Reaction. It's brought to you by Byers Auto. So Ohio State brought out a bunch of newcomers that were already on campus, have been here for the last few weeks, going through workouts, signed, sealed, and delivered for the Buckeyes, and then a couple transfer portal additions as well. A fun sort of morning to get to know a lot of these guys that Zack Carpenter has a built-in relationship with many throughout the coverage of the recruiting. Spencer Holbrook knows all about him. Tim May and myself, we're just trying to get to know them as best we can. A few we've done some stories with, but we said this about the coaching staff on Monday. This is another really impressive group of Buckeyes. I don't know who stood out the most or handled it the best. We can get into that, but overall, that's a pretty solid collection of dudes.
Yeah, and I think I wrote this in one of the stories that went up today on lettermenrow.com. The 2021 class was it was the best of all time rankings wise for Ohio State, and at one point in time the 22 class looked like it was going to stack up to that, potentially even surpass it. So then we wind up with 21 in this class. It's another top 5 class. It's ranked number 4, and it's like, does it feel a little disappointing? Like, no, because there is so much talent in this room and the 11 guys that were here today. But it just felt like a little bit of the luster was taken off of it because of what it looked like midway through the cycle. But that happens every year. If Burma's here, I guarantee you'd be saying that right now. Like every year, midway through the cycle, everyone thinks it's going to be the greatest class of all time. We're going to get 20 billion 5-stars. That didn't happen, but you still have the number 1 ranked quarterback in the country, number 1 overall recruit in the country, 2 5-star linebackers. I know Sonny Styles isn't here yet, but I'm just curious from your guys' perspective, what your overall thoughts are on the class, who stood out today from first time talking to them for some of you guys.
I mean, it's hard not to be blown away by what you heard from Devin Brown. I mean, when you think about when we talked to Kyle McCord a year ago, you got some shades of talking to Kyle McCord when you talk to Devin Brown. Just a really polished kid, knows what he's talking about, really cerebral, ready to play the quarterback position. Understands what it takes to develop under Ryan Day, and it all came out. You don't hear a lot of guys talk with the kind of confidence Devin Brown did. Their first ever time being in front of 40, 50 media members out on the practice field at the Woody. That just doesn't happen very often. And for Devin Brown to come out here and really ace that, we looked for, when we talked to the coaches the other day, we looked for signs that those guys could handle the spotlight. And, you get a glimpse of like what exactly these coaches are about just by one media session. You can kind of tell. Well, that light flicked on right when you start talking to Devin Brown. I think that's the most impressive part. Plenty of guys out here, did a really nice job in this media session, but, the quarterback position is the most important position in all of sports, and you got to be impressed with what you heard from Devin Brown.
Yeah, Devin Brown looked like he'd been sitting in front of 20 or 30 reporters all of his life. I mean, that was the coolness about him. I had him on my podcast, back in December when he first signed, and I've just been impressed by his just natural ability to talk, and in essence, I think that leads to leadership, and I think that's what stands out about him. Kai Stokes, is that the kid's name, the safety though? Man, one of the first things he says, it's just me going, is one of those guys that's already a legend in his mind is Josh Proctor, about talking about watching him play the way he
did his homework and he knew to bring that up with
I think he did. I mean, I swear to goodness, and then Gabe Powers, here's a guy from Marysville right up the road, how good is he going to be on this level? He's already played pretty big time football, but he's a big guy who needs to get bigger, and he knows that, et cetera. But yeah, Caleb Burton, I mean, when Devin Brown refers to him as electric, and these other guys, and then you talk to him, and just from the same high school as Garrett Wilson, from big time, his senior year, same high school, because his dad resigned at his former high school the year before. But all of these guys, they can express themselves, and it's cool dealing with them in that regard. So it gives you kind of a good feeling about them.
It's a well-spoken group, isn't it?
Yeah, before you ever see them play,
There's usually a lot of nerves. Ohio State shifted to using signing day to introduce a lot of the early enrollees 5, 6, 7 years ago. It's an intimidating situation, and I mentioned that with the coaching staff on Monday. You don't deal with this a lot, and even in the prevalence of the recruiting website era where they do more interviews, that's one-on-one, maybe text, whatever. That's very different than being out here. You didn't see hardly anybody who was uncomfortable in that situation, and Spencer brought up Devin Brown. I mean, I think he's going to dominate the discussion here, as quarterbacks always do. I would have a different view of comparing it to Kyle McCord, where Kyle McCord, I would put in more of a Tom Brady serious mindset. The confidence was the same for both, but the way their personalities come out, I found to be very different, and they're all different than C.J. Stroud. You don't have to be the same.
Yeah.
Byrne brought this up the other day, and I've also talked to people in this building who've made this comparison. That press conference was like listening to Joe Burrow, and
yes,
what that means from here, I don't know. They look similar. He talked about his weight, and there's going to be a lot that's going to have to be added, arm strength, all that stuff. I'm not going to revise history. Joe Burrow, when he got here, had that same swagger and mentality, but you knew that the physical part was going to take time. So I'm not going to say someday Devin Brown is going to be playing for the Super Bowl, but if you're asking me what my first impression was like for Devin Brown, it was the same one that I had when Joe Burrow arrived.
And I was kind of thinking along those same lines, but I didn't want to be the one to say it.
Yeah, it's a mouthful.
Isn't it funny though how Joe Burrow is now?
That kind of hurts right now because I'm a Chiefs fan.
Yeah,
so
of course. Yeah.
Still a little,
well, that's too
hurt
bad
by that. But no, what's always impressed me is when I first got on the beat a couple of years ago, like some of the first guys I talked to were Jackson Smith and Jigba, G. Scott, and they're 17, 18-year-olds, and they're already talking like they're 22, 23-year-old, like in the pros, like polished, and that's kind of a bigger picture, taking a step back and looking at it. That's kind of how the recruiting process matures a lot of these guys, because like you said, they have to do so many interviews over and over and over, especially at a place like Ohio State. I know Byrne was just telling you on your podcast the other day, which is something that me and him both deal with, is there's 8 recruiting outlets that
minimum
that cover Ohio State. So we all are kind of just going at the for interviews all the time,
bombarding them,
but
competing.
Exactly, and that kind of I think settles them into a space like this. One guy I want to bring up from one Brown to the next is Jair Brown. He's a guy that on our show for the early signing period, he's a guy I mentioned at the very end, like really interested to see what he brings to the table. And it's a guy that I don't really feel like a lot of people talk about just because of the Ohio connection. He's been in the class for so long.
Mm-hmm.
He was the first commit in the class. And cornerback was originally there was 4 cornerback commits, and they lost their 2 highest ranked one, 2 5-stars. So now it's just Jair Brown and Ryan Turner. So I feel like that kind of maybe puts more of an emphasis on guys like him and Ryan. They get here early, like what Denzel Burke did when he got here early. So I don't know if you, Spencer, if there's an emphasis on the cornerback position from your point of view.
Well, I go from one emphasis to the next, and they emphasize corner, but they also needed a tight end, and I still think they probably do need a tight end for the roster next year. But if you're looking at a guy we saw today who could compete early, Bennett Christian walks out on this field, and you got no clue who he is. Like, that's a big kid.
I think that looks like a tight end.
He might already be the biggest tight end in the room coming in.
He looks like
240-something.
He's not as muscular or as well-rounded as Jeremy Ruckert was. I'm not going to make that comparison. Jeremy Ruckert's going to be the first tight end taken in the NFL this year. But when you need a body that knows how to block, that can learn the route concepts, Bennett Christian can be that. And I thought he could be an early contributor at first, and now just seeing him once, you think like, okay, that guy can handle a couple of, some defensive ends in the Big Ten. The other guy, since we're just kind of rattling off, what impressed us, Zach Harrison, when he came here, kind of didn't really need the comparisons to other guys. Jack Sawyer, I think, wants to be his own guy. It's really funny. Caden Curry, you get him on the practice field here.
Don't bring him up, and
he says, I'm Nick Bosa. Like, I want to be Nick Bosa. and it's kind of funny. Like, he doesn't shy away from those comparisons. Nick Bosa was the number 2 overall pick, and was a few plays away from competing in the Super Bowl, and for the second time in his career, he's a freak athlete. And for Caden Curry to just kind of say that, I know Zach loves him and followed his recruitment better than anybody, but for a guy to step onto this field this early in the process and mention a name like Nick Bosa, it tells you the confidence that defensive end carries into that room.
Yeah, I asked
real quick, just on Spencer's point there. He's been getting compared to Nick Bosa since the day he got the offer from Ohio State. Larry Johnson's the first one who compared him to that. So he's had those, and he's kind of embraced those.
Well, that's what I asked him about. I said, there's been a buzz about this guy. Maybe it's because of you guys, but there's been a buzz about him. and then all it was done, it was enhanced at the All-American practices, All-American game practices, and even Devin Brown was talking about how he just brings it, and stuff. And I'm just really impressed by him because he's kind of like sits there, kind of like the Bosas, kind of like just low key, just talking to you. You know. Oh, I love talking to the Bosa brothers
them.
when they were here, just because of their approach to things. But I've really got my eye on that guy because he doesn't look the part. You know, physically, he's not that big guy, but really Nick Bosa's not a huge guy either. You know, neither was Joey for the most part. But boy, they just have a way of getting to the quarterback, but they do it with a hell-bent attitude, and that kind of comes through with that guy. I'm very impressed by him. And the other guy, Tanner Mcallister, when I asked him, I said, who's a player that you've seen, the transfer from Oklahoma State, who's a player that you've seen that could fit that Leo position? You know, a guy he brought up immediately?
Caden Curry.
No, Cade Stover. Cade was you were close.
Well, that was the second because somebody else had brought up Caden Curry playing.
But it was interesting.
Oh, C.J. Hicks, excuse me.
Yes,
that wasn't Tanner McAllister.
Exactly, but isn't that interesting that they both that a guy who's played in a defense that runs that position sees something in Cade Stover that he thinks could fit. I mean, I think we're in for an interesting next several months.
Yeah, it's.
I didn't mean to jump into that.
Right. I mean, and that plays into what Spencer brought up with the tight end situation, and if Ohio State will pursue another one in the transfer portal, you know, because Ryan Day kind of said, well, we'll see what happens with Cade and then the numbers. If it's at 5, I mean, Cade Stover is going to play linebacker. He's going to potentially play at that Leo spot. We'll see. That's where he wants to be. I think that's where he's most comfortable, probably the chance where he has the best ability to impact the Buckeyes. And I sort of sit here now and I've said if there's a position of need to still pursue tight end would be it. I'm not sure that that's a necessity for Ohio State at this point, or that they view it that way, because Joe Royer was coming along. You have Mitch Rossi back. You have Sam Hart in there, and you know that G. Scott can flex out and do some things that he could fill more of maybe that Rucker type role. Healthy big spring. I wrote about that at Lettermen Row in the last week or two.
Yeah.
But then if you put somebody in and you don't know for sure, you wait, you see Bennett Christian, you know that he's big, you know that he's blocked a lot, play for a I formation offense, attached tight end throughout his entire high school career and only really throwing off play action. Well, he looks like he can hold up as an inline blocker for Ohio State. And if that's the case, and you have him and Sam Hart doing that, and you have Royer and G. Scott that can flex out, and Mitch Rossi to play fullback, well, that's 5. You don't generally want to count on a true freshman to do that. But if there's one who can, maybe it's him.
Sounds like a quorum to me.
That's Bennett Christian is one of the guys that Spencer and I and Berm, we kind of mentioned as one of those under-the-radar guys who really could have an impact from day one because of everything you just hit on. And I think the offensive system he came from in Georgia, like you just said, is kind of tailor-made to accentuate his strengths that he could have at Ohio State. He's a polished blocker, and he needs to work better at improving his pass catching ability, but that's not exactly what Ohio State needs right now from the tight end.
Yeah, and you just keep you're on the list of all these guys we talked to, whether it's C.J. Hicks, people want to ask about that Captain Buckeye moniker that kind of is gone from him now because
there are real captains here.
Yeah, they're real captains, and you're a freshman now. I asked Gabe Powers about kind of being humbled a little bit by not being the superstar in his town anymore. All these guys have these different stories, but like we just keep coming back to it. It's just an impressive group of guys. And you 21 obviously was the class that if they're going to win a national championship for the next couple of years, it's going to be on the back of that 21 class. But these guys aren't far behind them, and I know that the numbers don't look like it because there's only 21 guys in the entire class. And a lot of these guys, I think they're going to get 10 more that aren't early enrollees. But with what they have out here right now, that's a championship nucleus that you can build around for the future. That we just witnessed right there.
And the kid who transferred from Arizona State, Chip Trainum. Chip Trainum. He wants to revolutionize linebacker play. I mean, he's moving from being a running back at Arizona State to moving into that linebacker room. And what a weird linebacker room that is right now. When you think about it, all the guys who have matriculated there from the other side of the ball to a certain extent. But it's really funny, the anecdote he threw in there about his whole immediate family, people are most near and dear to him, all moved out to Arizona after he did to go to Arizona State. Now they're all living out there in the warmth, and we're sitting here waiting for another mega cyclone bomb to hit us as we videotape this.
Scientific term?
Yeah, I don't know. I forgot what they call it. They come up with these new terms to make weather.
Snowpocalypse.
Storm Landon, I think, is the name of it, but to scare us about stuff, But there's a guy who hasn't played linebacker on college football. I mean, who exudes confidence that he's going to get it done. I'm really intrigued just watching that because he's a recruit as much as anybody else is in this group.
Yeah, so 5-6 weeks away. The pads come on. Obviously, the Lettermen Row crew here is excited to see all these newcomers out on the field, as well as a pretty deep roster full of veterans and guys with a ton of experience from that 2021 class that Spencer brought up a second ago. We're going to get ready for that as best we can. We got a ton more coverage of both the coaching staff and the new signees. 2 of them today, right? Both are in. Carson
Both
Hensman.
are in. Amari Abor and Carson Hensman are both officially in the class.
Is Abor, is that, now that it's done, is that a major get? I mean, how would you describe it?
He's one of those that used to be a 5-star and then kind of saw his development regress a little bit, but then his senior year he came back, and now he's one of those guys who could be a huge get for them.
A little bit of sweat coming off those foreheads this morning, hoping to make sure that letter of intent made its way to Columbus. I'll say that.
DocuSign.
So we'll cover that. As always, we're going to get ready for spring ball. We're going to talk more about those new coaches that were introduced on Monday. Got a lot more coverage to keep this off-season rolling along as we dive into anything and everything for Ohio State football at LettermenRow.com. This has been Rapid Reaction. It's brought to you by Byers Auto. That's Spencer, Holbrook, Tim May, Zack Carpenter. I am Austin Ward. We'll see you next time.